Jason Brooks never imagined that stopping a robbery outside the Meridian Grand Hotel would change everything. One moment he was just another single dad driving rideshare to make ends meet. The next, he was tackling a masked thief in the middle of downtown. But when the woman he saved looked him in the eyes and whispered, "Thank you," neither of them knew their lives were about to collide in ways that would challenge everything they thought they knew about courage, redemption, and second chances. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The dashboard clock read 12:47 a.m. when Jason Brooks pulled his aging Honda Accord to the curb outside the Meridian Grand Hotel. The night air hung thick and humid, the kind of oppressive heat that made shirts stick to skin and turned every breath into effort. Downtown was quieter than usual for a Friday night. The typical weekend crowd thinned by the late hour and the promise of rain that had been threatening all evening but never quite delivered. Jason killed the engine and stepped out, his knees protesting slightly as they always did these days. 38 years old, and his body already kept a detailed record of every hard landing, every forced march, every sacrifice he'd made during his years in the service. He'd been a military officer once, the kind of man who commanded respect with a look and led soldiers through situations that would break lesser men. Now he drove strangers around the city for money, picking up rides whenever his 9-year-old son Liam was asleep, or staying with Jason's sister for the night. The passenger door opened and Mrs. Chen, a regular customer who worked late shifts at the hospital, emerged with her usual warm smile. She was a tiny woman in her 60s, barely 5 feet tall, with silver-streaked hair always pulled back in a practical bun. "Thank you so much, Jason," she said, fumbling with her purse as she tried to manage both it and her work bag. "I don't know what I'd do without your reliable service. Those other drivers, they cancel on me all the time." "Happy to help, Mrs. Chen," Jason replied, moving around to the trunk. He popped it open and retrieved her overnight bag, the one she carried on nights when she pulled double shifts and needed to stay at the hospital. "You working another 16-hour day?" 14 this time, she said with a weary chuckle. "We're short-staffed again. But that's the job, right? People need care, no matter what time it is." Jason knew all about that kind of dedication, that sense of duty that pushed you beyond exhaustion because someone else was counting on you. It was the same drive that had him out here at 1 in the morning, hunting for fares instead of sleeping, because Liam needed new shoes and the electricity bill wasn't going to pay itself. He handed Mrs. Chen her bag, and she pressed a $20 bill into his hand despite his protests. "The app already charged you," he said. "That's a tip, young man, and I won't hear another word about it." She patted his arm with surprising firmness for such a small woman. "You have a son to take care of. Don't you dare try to give that back." Before Jason could respond, a sound cut through the night air that made his blood run cold. It was a scream, sharp and terrified, the kind of sound that bypassed rational thought and triggered pure instinct. Both he and Mrs. Chen froze, heads turning toward the source. Across the street, maybe 40 yards away at the crosswalk, a scene was unfolding in the harsh glow of the streetlights. A woman in a blue dress was on the ground, and a figure loomed over her, a man in dark clothing with something covering his face. Even from this distance, Jason could see the struggle, could see the man yanking at the woman's purse while she held on desperately. "Oh my God," Mrs. Chen whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Jason's mind went calm, crystalline clear, the way it always had in moments of crisis. It was the same clarity that had saved his life and the lives of his soldiers more times than he could count. Time seemed to slow down as he processed the situation in fractions of a second. The attacker had his back to them, focused entirely on his victim. The woman was fighting back but losing, her heels making it impossible to find purchase on the pavement. There were no other pedestrians visible on the street, no police cars in sight, no help coming. "Call 911, Jason said to Mrs. Chen, his voice steady and authoritative in a way that brought back muscle memory from another life. Then he was moving. His feet hit the pavement in a dead sprint, his body remembering the training even if his knees wished he'd forget. The distance closed fast. 30 yards. 20. The woman's scream came again, higher pitched this time, edged with real fear as the attacker succeeded in ripping the purse from her grip. The man straightened up, triumphant, the stolen bag clutched in his gloved hands. He was wearing a ski mask despite the heat, and through the eye holes Jason could see him glancing around, checking for witnesses. That's when he spotted Jason charging across the street like a freight train with a personal vendetta. "Hey!" Jason shouted, not slowing down. "Drop it!" The attacker's body language shifted instantly from predator to prey. He took one look at the 6'2" former soldier bearing down on him and made a calculation. He turned to run. He didn't make it 3 steps. Jason hit him like a linebacker, all controlled violence and precise force. The tackle was textbook, the kind of thing they drilled into him during basic training and that he'd practiced 1,000 times in hand-to-hand combat courses. He wrapped his arms around the attacker's midsection, lifted him slightly off the ground, and drove him down hard onto the pavement. The impact knocked the wind out of both of them, but Jason recovered faster. Years of muscle memory took over. He secured the attacker's right arm, twisting it up behind his back in a control hold that made any resistance extremely painful. The stolen purse skittered across the concrete, its contents spilling out in a trail of lipstick, keys, and a smartphone with a cracked screen. "Stay down!" Jason growled, applying just enough pressure to make his point clear. The attacker bucked once, trying to throw him off, but Jason had 50 pounds on him and a lifetime of training in how to control a hostile combatant. He pressed down harder, his knee between the man's shoulder blades, and felt the fight go out of him. "I said stay down." For a moment, the only sounds were Jason's heavy breathing and the attacker's wheezing gasps. Then the calculation changed again. The man clearly decided that whatever was in that purse wasn't worth getting arrested or worse. With a sudden twist that Jason didn't quite anticipate, he wrenched free, leaving his jacket behind in Jason's grip, and scrambled to his feet. Jason moved to tackle him again, but the attacker was already running, stumbling slightly but finding his speed. He darted into the alley beside the hotel, and Jason made a split-second decision not to pursue. The woman was still on the ground. She was the priority now, not revenge or some misplaced sense of finishing the fight. He let the attacker go and turned back to where the woman sat on the pavement, her blue dress torn at the shoulder, one shoe missing, her eyes wide with shock. "You okay, ma'am?" Jason asked, his voice automatically gentling as he approached. He could see her trembling, the adrenaline spike hitting her system hard now that the immediate danger had passed. She stared at him, not speaking at first, just looking at him like he was something impossible. Her hair had come loose from whatever elegant style it had been in, falling in dark waves around her face. She was younger than he'd initially thought, maybe mid-30s, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that even in shock held a remarkable intelligence. She started, her voice shaking. "I think so. I mean, yes, I'm not hurt. He didn't... You stopped him." Jason nodded and extended his hand. "Let's get you up off this street." She took his hand and he pulled her to her feet with gentle firmness. She swayed slightly, and his other hand automatically went to her elbow to steady her. Up close, he could see she was dressed expensively, the kind of outfit that cost more than his monthly car payment. The blue silk dress, even torn, was clearly designer. Her jewelry, though simple, was real gold, not the costume pieces most people wore downtown at night. "Your purse," Jason said, releasing her elbow and moving to gather the scattered contents. He collected everything quickly and efficiently: wallet, phone, keys, makeup, a slim tablet, breath mints, a slim folder with what looked like legal documents. He zipped it all back into the leather bag and handed it to her. She clutched it to her chest like a life preserver. "Thank you," she whispered. "I can't... If you hadn't been here..." "But I was," Jason said simply. "That's what matters." Across the street, Mrs. Chen was hurrying toward them as fast as her short legs would carry her, phone still pressed to her ear. "Police are on their way," she called out. 5 minutes, they said. Jason nodded his thanks. He turned back to the woman in the blue dress and really looked at her for the first time. Despite the dishevelment, despite the fear still evident in her eyes, there was something striking about her. Not just beautiful, though she certainly was that, but something more. A quality of presence, of self-possession that even trauma couldn't completely shake. "We should get you inside," he said, gesturing toward the hotel entrance. "You'll be safer there, and you can sit down while we wait for the police." She nodded mutely and took a step forward, then winced. She'd lost one of her heels in the struggle, and the other had broken during the fall. Jason watched her try to walk, saw her wobble, and made another quick decision. "Here," he said, turning his back to her slightly and crouching down. "Climb on, I'll carry you." "What? No, I couldn't possibly." "Ma'am, with all due respect, your feet are torn up and you're shaking like a leaf. Let me help you." There was a pause, a moment of internal debate that Jason could feel even without seeing her face. Then small hands gripped his shoulders, and he felt her weight settle onto his back. She was lighter than he'd expected, almost fragile feeling despite her height. He stood easily, adjusting his grip under her knees, and started walking toward the hotel entrance. Mrs. Chen trotted alongside them, still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, answering questions about the attacker's description and direction of escape. Jason tuned it out, focusing instead on the woman on his back and making sure his long strides didn't jostle her too much. "I don't even know your name," she said quietly, her voice close to his ear. "Jason Brooks." "Eleanor," she replied. "Eleanor Morgan." The name tickled something in the back of Jason's mind, a sense that he should recognize it, but he couldn't place it. Probably she was just someone local, maybe a regular at the hotel or a businesswoman staying in town. Downtown was full of people whose names you were supposed to know. They reached the hotel entrance, and the doorman, who had apparently been on some kind of break during the actual robbery, came rushing out with wide eyes and stammered apologies. Jason ignored him and carried Eleanor into the lobby, finally setting her down on one of the plush couches near the concierge desk. The concierge himself, a thin man in his 50s with a name tag reading Martin, came hurrying over with a first aid kit and a bottle of water. "Ms. Morgan, my God, what happened? Are you hurt? Should I call an ambulance?" "I'm fine, Martin," Eleanor said, accepting the water with shaking hands. "Or I will be. This man saved me from a robbery right outside." Martin turned to Jason with an expression of profound gratitude mixed with horror that something like this had happened practically on the hotel's doorstep. "Sir, I cannot thank you enough. If there's anything we can do, just make sure she's okay," Jason interrupted. "And the police are on their way. They'll want to talk to both of us." He glanced at his phone, checking the time. Already past 1 in the morning. He'd promised Liam's babysitter, his sister Michelle, that he'd be home by 2 at the latest. She had work in the morning, couldn't stay all night. He should probably get going as soon as he gave his statement to the cops. But when he looked back at Eleanor Morgan, she was staring at him again with that same intense focus, like she was trying to memorize his face or figure out some puzzle only she could see. "Please don't leave yet," she said softly. "Not until the police come. I'd feel better if you stayed." Jason hesitated, thinking about Michelle and the time and his exhaustion, but then he saw the barely concealed fear still lurking behind Eleanor's composed exterior. She was holding it together through sheer force of will, but she was not okay. Not yet. "I'll stay," he said, settling into the chair across from her couch, "until the police come." Relief flooded her features. "Thank you." Mrs. Chen bustled over, having finally finished with the 911 dispatcher. She fussed over Eleanor like a mother hen, checking her injuries, which turned out to be mostly superficial: scraped palms, torn stockings, bruised knees. Nothing that required emergency care, though Martin insisted on calling the hotel's doctor anyway, just to be safe. While they waited, Jason found himself studying the hotel lobby with professional eyes. It was nice, upscale but not ostentatiously so. Real marble floors, expensive but understated furniture, art on the walls that looked original rather than mass-produced prints. The kind of place that catered to business travelers with expense accounts and wealthy tourists who wanted luxury without flashiness. Eleanor Morgan fit here in a way Jason knew he never would. Even disheveled and shaken, she carried herself with the kind of natural grace that spoke of a lifetime of privilege. Old money, his mother would have called it, though Jason had never quite understood what made money old versus new beyond the attitude of the people spending it. "You served," Eleanor said suddenly, breaking his reverie. It wasn't a question. Jason met her eyes. "Yes, ma'am. Army. 12 years. "I thought so. The way you moved, the way you handled that situation, that's not something civilians do." She took a sip of water, her hands steadier now. "Officer?" "Captain. Infantry." She nodded as if that confirmed something. Why'd you leave? It was a personal question, especially from a stranger, but something about the way she asked it, genuinely curious rather than nosy, made Jason answer honestly. My wife got sick, he said quietly. Cancer. She needed me home, not deployed halfway around the world, so I resigned my commission and came back to take care of her and our son. Eleanor's expression softened with immediate understanding and sympathy. I'm so sorry. Is she? 3 years ago, Jason said. It was fast at the end, aggressive, but we had some good time together before. He trailed off, not sure why he was telling this woman his life story. Maybe it was the lateness of the hour, or the adrenaline crash, or just the strange intimacy that came from shared trauma. Whatever it was, he found himself continuing. After she passed, I had to figure out how to be both parents to a 6-year-old boy. The Army pension helps, but it's not enough. I've been doing security work, some private consulting, driving rideshare when I need extra cash. Whatever keeps food on the table and a roof over our heads. That's why you were here tonight, Eleanor said. You were working. Dropping off a passenger when I heard you scream. Mrs. Chen piped up from where she'd been quietly listening. Jason's the best driver I've ever had. Always on time, always polite, always makes you feel safe. If more people were like him, the world would be a much better place. Jason felt his ears heat with embarrassment. Mrs. Chen, you don't have to. I absolutely do, she insisted. You're a good man, Jason Brooks, and there's no shame in working hard to take care of your family. Your wife would be proud of you. Before Jason could respond, the front doors opened and 2 police officers walked in, a man and a woman, both in their 30s. The woman took the lead, introducing herself as Officer Patterson and her partner as Officer Mills. They took statements from everyone, starting with Eleanor and working their way through Jason, Mrs. Chen, and even Martin the concierge, who hadn't actually seen anything but could confirm that Ms. Morgan was a regular guest at the hotel. The process took almost 45 minutes. Officer Patterson was thorough, asking detailed questions about the attacker's appearance, his escape route, the stolen items. Jason gave her everything he could remember, including the fact that the attacker had left his jacket behind in their struggle. Mills bagged it as evidence, hoping for prints or DNA. You did good work tonight, Mr. Brooks, Patterson said as she finished up her notes. Quick thinking, appropriate force didn't pursue beyond what was safe. If everyone who witnessed a crime responded like you did, our jobs would be a lot easier. I just did what anyone would do, Jason said. No, Eleanor interjected firmly. You did what almost no one would do. Most people would have looked away, or recorded it on their phones, or maybe called for help but not gotten involved. You didn't hesitate. You put yourself at risk for a complete stranger. Officer Patterson nodded agreement. Miss Morgan's right. Most people freeze or flee. What you did tonight took courage and training. You're a hero whether you want to admit it or not. Jason shifted uncomfortably. He'd never liked that word, hero. He'd known real heroes in the Army, men and women who'd made the ultimate sacrifice. All he'd done was tackle one scared kid in a ski mask. I should get going, he said, standing up. My sister's watching my son and she needs to get home. Of course, Eleanor said, also standing. She was barefoot now, having abandoned her broken heels. Even without them, she was tall, maybe 5'9" or 5'10". But please, at least let me buy you a drink or something, to say thank you properly. Jason shook his head. That's not necessary, Miss Morgan. I'm just glad you're okay. It's past 2 in the morning and you have a child at home, she said, understanding flickering in her eyes. But perhaps another time? Please. I'd like to repay your kindness somehow. There was something in her tone, an earnestness that went beyond polite gratitude. Jason found himself pulling out his wallet and extracting one of the simple business cards he'd had printed up for his security consulting work. It had his name, phone number, and email, nothing fancy. If you really want to, he said, handing it to her, but honestly, no repayment necessary. Take care of yourself, Miss Morgan. She took the card, studying it like it was something precious. Eleanor. Please call me Eleanor. Eleanor? He repeated. Get some rest, and maybe don't walk around downtown alone after midnight for a while. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Noted. Jason said goodbye to Mrs. Chen, who insisted on hugging him despite the height difference, and nodded to the police officers. As he walked out of the hotel lobby into the humid night air, he felt the exhaustion hit him like a physical weight. His knees ached, his back hurt where he'd hit the pavement, and he was pretty sure he'd have bruises tomorrow. But as he slid back into his Honda and started the engine, he also felt something else. A sense of rightness, of having done what needed doing when it needed doing. It was the same feeling he used to get after a successful mission, when his soldiers were safe and the objective was accomplished. He'd been living without that feeling for so long that he'd almost forgotten what it was like. The drive home took 20 minutes through empty streets. Michelle was waiting up when he walked in, stretched out on his couch, watching late-night television with the volume low. "You're late," she said without heat, sitting up and stretching. "Sorry, had a situation." His sister's eyes narrowed. She knew him too well. "What kind of situation?" "The kind where someone needed help and I was there," Jason said carefully. "Nothing major. Already gave a statement to the cops." "Jason Brooks, if you got yourself hurt..." "I'm fine, Mach, promise. Just tired." She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You can't save everyone, you know." "Maybe not, but I can save the ones in front of me." Michelle stood and grabbed her purse, but not before giving him a quick hug. "That's what I'm afraid of. One of these days you're going to run into something you can't handle." Tonight wasn't that night. After she left, Jason checked on Liam, finding his son sprawled across his bed in that boneless way only children could manage. The nightlight cast soft shadows across the boy's face, and Jason felt his heart clench with the fierce protectiveness that had defined his life since the moment Liam was born. Everything he did, every shift he worked, every sacrifice he made, it was all for this kid. To give him chances Jason never had. To keep him safe and fed and loved. To be the kind of father that Liam's mother would have wanted him to be. He pulled the blanket up over his son's shoulders, pressed a kiss to his forehead, and retreated to his own room. As he fell into bed, still fully clothed, too tired to change, his last thought before sleep claimed him was of Eleanor Morgan's face in the hotel lobby. The way she'd looked at him when she took his business card, like it was something important, like he was someone worth remembering. He fell asleep thinking that he'd probably never see her again. That this was just one of those brief intersections of lives that happened and then faded into memory. A story he might tell Liam someday about the time Dad stopped a robbery downtown. He had no idea how wrong he was. Morning came too early, announced by Liam jumping on his bed at 7:30 with all the energy of a caffeinated tornado. "Dad, wake up! You promised we'd go to the park today if the weather was good." Jason groaned and tried to pull a pillow over his head, but Liam was having none of it. The kid yanked the pillow away with surprising strength for a 9-year-old. "Come on, Dad, it's Saturday, park day." All right, I'm up," Jason muttered, swinging his legs out of bed. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, the after effects of last night's tackle making themselves known. He suppressed a wince and smiled at his son instead. "Give me 20 minutes to shower and make breakfast, okay?" 15 minutes, Liam countered, with the negotiating skills of someone who'd been bargaining with his father since he could talk. "And can we have pancakes?" "Deal." Liam whooped and raced out of the room, leaving Jason to haul himself to the shower. As hot water pounded his sore muscles, he found his mind drifting back to Eleanor Morgan. He wondered how she was doing this morning, whether she'd slept, whether the fear had faded or lingered. He shook his head, annoyed at himself for the distraction. She was probably fine, probably had a dozen people around her to make sure she was okay. She didn't need Jason Brooks worrying about her from across town. Breakfast was chaotic but happy, the way mornings with Liam usually were. They made pancakes together, Liam insisting on helping flip them and only dropping one on the floor. They ate while Liam chattered about school and his friends and the new video game he wanted but definitely wasn't getting because Jason couldn't afford it right now. By 9:30 they were at the park, Liam running ahead to the playground while Jason found a bench in the shade. Other parents dotted the area, mostly mothers with younger kids. Jason recognized a few regulars, exchanged nods and small talk about the weather. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out expecting Michelle or maybe a ride request from the app, but the number was unknown. He answered anyway, years of training making him wary of unknown calls. "Hello? Mr. Brooks? This is Eleanor Morgan. We met last night. Jason sat up straighter, surprised. Ms. Morgan. Eleanor. Are you okay? I'm fine, thanks to you. Her voice was clearer than it had been last night, steadier. I hope I'm not disturbing your Saturday. Not at all. I'm at the park with my son. What can I do for you? There was a pause, and Jason could almost hear her choosing her words carefully. I know I mentioned wanting to thank you properly last night, and you said it wasn't necessary. But I've been thinking, and I'd really like to take you to dinner. Tonight, if you're available. Jason hesitated. Part of him wanted to say no, to keep that boundary clear between their worlds. But another part, a part he'd thought had died with his wife, was curious. Interested in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude or heroics. I'd have to arrange childcare, he said carefully. My sister usually watches Liam, but I'd have to check if she's available. Of course, take your time, and please bring your son if that's easier. I'd love to meet him. That decided it for Jason. Anyone willing to include Liam rather than seeing him as an obstacle was worth having dinner with. Let me call my sister and get back to you. What time were you thinking? 7? There's a restaurant called Tempest on 5th Avenue. Do you know it? Jason didn't, but he could find it. 7 works. Can I call you back at this number to confirm? Absolutely. And Jason, thank you for last night and for agreeing to this. It means more than you might realize. After they hung up, Jason sat staring at his phone for a long moment. Tempest on 5th Avenue. He'd heard of 5th Avenue, of course. It was where the old money lived and did business, where buildings had names instead of just addresses. Not his usual territory. Michelle picked up on the second ring when he called. Twice in 12 hours? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I need a favor. Can you watch Liam tonight around 6:30? His sister's voice went sly. Jason Brooks, do you have a date? It's not a date. It's dinner with someone who wants to say thank you. For what? For the situation I mentioned last night. And this person who wants to say thank you, are they female? Michelle, they are. Oh my God, you have an actual date. When's the last time you even went out with anyone? It's not a date, Jason insisted, though he could feel his ears heating. It's just dinner. Right. Well, your just dinner is approved. I'll be there at 6:15. And Jason, wear something nice, not your security polo. She hung up before he could protest that he always looked fine. Jason looked down at himself. Cargo shorts and a faded army t-shirt, his standard weekend uniform. Maybe Michelle had a point. The rest of the day passed in a blur of park time with Liam, followed by a grocery run and some half-hearted cleaning of their apartment. By 5 o'clock, Jason was standing in front of his closet, trying to remember the last time he'd needed to dress for anything nicer than a security briefing. He settled on dark jeans, a button-down shirt that Michelle had given him last Christmas and he'd never worn, and his good shoes, the ones that weren't sneakers or work boots. Looking at himself in the mirror, he barely recognized the man staring back. He looked almost like he had before, when he was Captain Brooks instead of just Jason, the rideshare driver. Michelle arrived early, took one look at him, and let out a low whistle. Okay, you clean up nice. Who is this woman? Her name's Eleanor Morgan. She's the one from last night, the one who was attacked. Michelle's expression turned serious. Jason, are you sure this is a good idea? She just went through something traumatic. Her emotions might be all over the place. She reached out to me, Jason said, and she sounded fine on the phone. I think she just wants to say thank you properly. Well, go have your not a date and try to relax. When's the last time you did something for yourself instead of for work or Liam? Jason couldn't actually remember. That probably said something about his life. He said goodbye to Liam, who barely looked up from his video game, and headed out. The drive to 5th Avenue took him through parts of the city he rarely visited, where the buildings got progressively taller and more expensive looking. Tempest turned out to be a sleek, modern establishment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a valet parking service that made Jason deeply uncomfortable. He bypassed the valet and found street parking 3 blocks away, then walked back to the restaurant. The host who greeted him was a young man in a suit that probably cost more than Jason's monthly rent. Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation? I'm meeting someone. Eleanor Morgan? The host's entire demeanor changed, going from professional to actively deferential. Of course. Miss Morgan is waiting for you. Right this way, please. Jason followed him through the restaurant, acutely aware of the other diners glancing his way. Despite Michelle's approval of his outfit, he felt underdressed, surrounded by designer suits and cocktail dresses. But then they reached a private corner table, and Eleanor Morgan looked up with a smile that made everything else fade into background noise. She was stunning. That was Jason's first coherent thought. Last night she'd been beautiful, even in distress, but tonight she was put together with the kind of effortless elegance that turned heads. A simple black dress, her dark hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. She stood as he approached, and Jason saw relief and genuine pleasure cross her features. Jason, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for inviting me, he said, shaking her extended hand. Her grip was firm, confident. You look well. Much better than last night. I feel better, please sit. The host pulled out Jason's chair, which was another thing that made him uncomfortable, but he managed to sit without making a fool of himself. A waiter appeared instantly with menus and water, rattling off specials that involved words Jason didn't recognize and ingredients he'd never heard of. After the waiter left, Eleanor leaned forward slightly. I should have asked where you'd like to eat. This is where I usually take business associates, but if you'd prefer somewhere else, this is fine, Jason assured her, though he was already mentally calculating the cost of the entrees he could see on the menu. He'd have to pick up extra shifts this week to cover this, even if she was technically inviting him. Eleanor seemed to read his mind. Please, order anything you like. This dinner is on me, and I won't take no for an answer. You saved my life last night. The least I can do is buy you a meal. You don't owe me anything, Jason said reflexively. I know I don't owe you. I want to. She paused, then added more quietly, I haven't been able to stop thinking about what happened, about what could have happened if you hadn't been there. I needed to see you again, to make sure you were real and not some figment of stress-induced imagination. Jason didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. The waiter returned, and Eleanor ordered wine with easy familiarity, then looked to Jason. He ordered a steak, medium rare, and immediately felt like he'd chosen wrong when Eleanor asked for something with truffle oil and microgreens. But she didn't seem to judge. Instead, as the evening progressed, she asked him questions about Liam, about his time in the army, about his life now. And Jason found himself talking more than he had in years, drawn out by her genuine interest and the way she listened like every word mattered. In return, he learned that Eleanor Morgan wasn't just wealthy. She was CEO of Morgan Holdings, a massive investment firm that managed billions in assets. She'd built it from nothing after aging out of the foster care system at 18, using scholarships and student loans to put herself through business school, then clawing her way up through the ranks of the financial world until she could start her own company. I don't usually tell people that part, she admitted over dessert. The foster care part. It's not exactly the origin story people expect from someone in my position. Why tell me? Jason asked. She considered the question, swirling wine in her glass. Because you told me about your wife, about what you gave up to take care of her and your son. That kind of honesty deserves honesty in return. The conversation flowed easily after that, like they'd known each other for years instead of hours. Jason found himself laughing, actually laughing, at Eleanor's dry observations about the business world and the absurd demands of corporate culture. She in turn seemed fascinated by his military stories, the ones he usually kept to himself. It wasn't until the check came, which Eleanor smoothly intercepted before Jason could even see the total, that he realized 3 hours had passed. I should get home, he said reluctantly. My sister has to work tomorrow. Eleanor nodded, but there was something in her expression, a hesitation. Jason, there's something else I wanted to ask you. Something beyond just saying thank you. Okay. Morgan Holdings is looking for a new head of security, someone to oversee protection for our executives, manage our security protocols, liaise with law enforcement. It's a full-time position with benefits, and given your background, your experience, the way you handled yourself last night, I think you'd be perfect for it. Jason felt like the ground had shifted under him. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an interview, Eleanor corrected. I don't hire people just because I'm grateful to them. But I do recognize talent when I see it, and you have skills we need. If you're interested, I'd like you to come by our offices Monday morning, 10 o'clock. At least hear me out properly before you decide. Jason's mind was racing. A real job, with benefits. The kind of security consulting work he'd been trying to break into for 3 years. It sounded too good to be true. It probably was too good to be true. But Eleanor was looking at him with that same intense focus from the hotel lobby, waiting for his answer. "I'll be there," Jason heard himself say. 10 o'clock Monday. The smile that crossed her face was radiant. "Excellent. I'll email you the details and address tonight." They walked out together, and Jason retrieved his car from its street parking spot while Eleanor waited with him. The valet had brought her car around, a sleek silver Mercedes that probably cost more than Jason had earned in the last 5 years combined. "Thank you again for dinner," Jason said, "and for the opportunity. I don't take it lightly." "I know you don't. That's part of why I made the offer." Eleanor extended her hand again, and Jason shook it. "Monday, 10 a.m. Don't be late." "Yes, ma'am." She laughed at that, a genuine sound of amusement. "You really can't help the military formality, can you?" "Old habits," Jason admitted with a slight smile. He drove home through the city lights, his mind churning with possibilities and doubts in equal measure. A real job. Benefits. A chance to use his actual skills instead of just driving people around. It felt like a door opening after years of being locked in a room. But it also felt dangerous somehow, like stepping out onto ice that might or might not hold his weight. Eleanor Morgan was clearly someone important, someone with power. Getting involved with her world, even just as an employee, meant exposure to things Jason had been avoiding since leaving the army. Responsibility beyond just himself and Liam. The chance to fail publicly instead of privately. Michelle took one look at his face when he walked in and knew something significant had happened. "Tell me everything." So he did, sitting at his small kitchen table while she made tea and listened with the focused attention of the lawyer she'd always wanted to be before life got in the way. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "This could be really good for you," she finally said. "For both of you. Liam needs stability, and this would give you that." "Or it could blow up in my face," Jason countered. "She barely knows me. What if I'm not what she thinks I am? What if I mess it up?" "Jason." Michelle reached across the table and grabbed his hand. "You've been selling yourself short for 3 years. Ever since Sarah died, you've been in survival mode, just trying to keep your head above water. But you're more than that. You were a damn good officer. You led men and women through impossible situations and brought them home alive. You can handle a security job for an investment firm." "It's not the job I'm worried about," Jason admitted quietly. I don't know. Everything else." "You mean Eleanor?" It wasn't a question, and Jason didn't try to deny it. "She's out of my league, Mish. Way out." "Maybe. Or maybe you're exactly what she needs. Someone real. Someone who doesn't want anything from her except to do the job well. You think everyone in her world is like that?" Jason didn't have an answer for that, so he just sighed and finished his tea. After Michelle left, he checked on Liam, still sleeping peacefully, and then lay in his own bed staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed with an incoming email. Eleanor sending the details for Monday's interview along with a brief note. "I meant what I said tonight. This isn't charity or gratitude. This is business. But I hope it becomes more than that. I hope it becomes the start of something good for both of us. Sleep well, Jason Brooks. You've earned it." Jason read the message 3 times, then set his phone aside. Sleep was a long time coming, and when it finally arrived, he dreamed of crosswalks and blue dresses, of second chances and doors opening into rooms filled with light. Monday morning couldn't come soon enough. Sunday passed in a haze of nervous energy that Jason tried unsuccessfully to hide from his son. He spent the morning researching Morgan Holdings online, discovering that Eleanor's company was even more impressive than she'd let on during dinner. Forbes had profiled her twice. The Wall Street Journal called her one of the most influential women in finance under 40. Her company managed pension funds, private equity investments, and philanthropic foundations with assets totaling over $8 billion. $8 billion. The number made Jason's head spin. He'd be responsible for protecting people who dealt with that kind of money every single day. "Dad, you're doing that thing again," Liam said from the couch, not looking up from his handheld game. "What thing?" "That thing where you stare at your computer and make the worried face, the one with the wrinkly forehead." Jason consciously smoothed his expression. I'm not worried. I'm preparing. For what? A job interview tomorrow. Now Liam did look up, interest sparking in his eyes that were so much like his mother's it sometimes hurt to look at them. A real job, like with an office and stuff? Maybe, if I don't mess it up. Liam set down his game and came over to where Jason sat at their small dining table that doubled as a desk. You won't mess it up. You're good at everything. The simple faith in his son's voice made Jason's throat tight. I'm not good at everything, buddy. You're good at the important stuff. Mom always said so. Jason pulled Liam into a hug, holding him close for a moment. Sarah had said that during one of their last conversations before the cancer took her ability to speak clearly. She'd gripped his hand with what little strength she had left and told him he was good at the important things, the things that mattered, being kind, being brave, being there when people needed him. Thanks, kiddo, Jason said, releasing him. Now go beat that level you've been stuck on all week. Liam grinned and raced back to the couch, and Jason returned to his research. By Sunday evening, he'd read everything publicly available about Morgan Holdings, memorized the names and faces of the executive team, and drafted answers to every interview question he could think of. He'd even pressed his one good suit, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral and hadn't touched since. Sleep came easier that night, exhaustion finally overriding anxiety. When his alarm went off at 6:30 Monday morning, Jason felt surprisingly calm. The nervousness had crystallized into focus, that same pre-mission clarity that had served him well in the Army. He got Liam ready for school, packed his lunch with extra care, and walked him to the bus stop like always. Wish me luck, Jason said as the yellow bus pulled up. You don't need luck, Dad. You've got skills. Liam delivered this pronouncement with the absolute certainty of a 9-year-old, then bounded onto the bus without looking back. Jason watched the bus disappear around the corner, then returned home to transform himself. The suit fit better than he remembered, though it pulled slightly across his shoulders from the muscle he'd built doing manual labor and security work. He shaved carefully, fixed his hair, and stared at himself in the mirror. Captain Brooks stared back, or at least a version of him. The man who'd led soldiers and made life-or-death decisions and earned the respect of everyone under his command. That man had been buried under 3 years of grief and survival mode, but he was still there, still capable. The Morgan Holdings building was downtown, a glass and steel tower that stretched 30 stories into the morning sky. Jason arrived 15 minutes early and spent that time sitting in his car, breathing deeply and centering himself the way he'd learned during Army leadership training. When his watch showed 9:55, he got out and walked through the revolving doors into a lobby that screamed wealth and power. The security desk was staffed by 2 guards in sharp uniforms, both wearing the kind of alert awareness that marked them as professionals. Jason approached and gave his name, and one of the guards checked his computer before nodding. Miss Morgan is expecting you, Mr. Brooks. Take the elevator to the 28th floor. Her assistant will meet you there. The elevator was glass on one side, providing a view of the city as it rose. Jason watched downtown spread out below him, thinking about how different this world was from the one he'd been living in. Up here, decisions got made that affected thousands of lives. Money moved in amounts most people couldn't comprehend. Power concentrated and radiated outward. The 28th floor was quieter than Jason had expected, more subdued. Thick carpets muffled footsteps. The walls displayed original art that Jason suspected was worth more than his entire net worth. A woman in her 50s with perfectly styled gray hair and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes stood waiting by the elevator. Mr. Brooks, I'm Patricia Chen, Miss Morgan's executive assistant. Please follow me. Jason followed her down a hallway lined with offices, each one occupied by someone who looked busy and important. They passed a conference room where a meeting was clearly in progress, multiple screens displaying charts and graphs that meant nothing to Jason, but everything to the people studying them intently. Patricia stopped at a door at the end of the hall, knocked once, and opened it without waiting for a response. Miss Morgan, Mr. Brooks is here. Thank you, Patricia. Please hold my calls. Eleanor's office was corner-positioned with floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides, providing a panoramic view of the city. But Jason barely noticed the view because Eleanor herself commanded all his attention. She stood behind a massive desk made of dark wood, wearing a charcoal gray suit that was all business, Her hair pulled back in a way that made her look older, more authoritative. This was Eleanor Morgan, the CEO, and she was a far cry from the shaken woman in a torn blue dress he'd rescued Friday night. "Jason, thank you for coming." She came around the desk to shake his hand, and her grip was firm, professional. "Please, sit." She gestured to two chairs arranged around a small table by one of the windows, a more casual setup than her imposing desk would have provided. Jason sat, and Eleanor settled across from him with a tablet and a folder. "I want to start by being very clear about something," she said, meeting his eyes directly. "What happened Friday night has no bearing on this interview. If I didn't think you were genuinely qualified for this position, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." A slight smile tugged at her lips. "You can call me Eleanor. We're not in the army." "Sorry, habit." "Don't apologize for good manners." She opened the folder and Jason saw his resume, the one he'd emailed her Sunday night after she'd requested it. "I've reviewed your background. 12 years Army infantry officer, rose to captain, multiple deployments, commendations for leadership under fire, specialized training in security protocols and threat assessment. Since leaving the service, you've done private security consulting, personal protection work, and supplemented with ride-share driving." She looked up from the paper. "What you haven't done is worked in corporate security, so let me explain what this position entails." For the next 20 minutes, Eleanor outlined the role with impressive detail. Morgan Holdings employed over 300 people across multiple offices. They handled sensitive financial information, hosted high-profile clients, and occasionally dealt with threats ranging from corporate espionage to angry investors who'd lost money. The head of security would oversee a team of 8, coordinate with local law enforcement, manage access protocols, and ensure the physical safety of all personnel. "The salary is $120,000 annually, plus benefits," Eleanor said. "Health insurance, retirement matching, 3 weeks vacation to start. There's also a signing bonus of $10,000 if you accept, and annual performance bonuses based on company results." Jason tried not to react to the numbers, but his heart was hammering. That was more money than he'd made in the last 2 years combined. Life-changing money. Liam could have new shoes whenever he needed them. They could move out of their cramped apartment into something better. Jason could stop working 80-hour weeks just to stay afloat. "What's the catch?" he heard himself ask. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "Catch?" "It's a generous offer, very generous, for someone with no corporate experience." "The catch is that you'll work for me," Eleanor said bluntly. "And I have high standards. I expect excellence, not mediocrity. I expect problems solved before they become crises. I expect loyalty, discretion, and absolute professionalism. Can you deliver that?" Jason held her gaze. "Yes." "Tell me why I should believe you." It was a challenge, delivered in a tone that made clear Eleanor was done being grateful and was now fully in CEO mode. Jason respected that. He sat up straighter and spoke with the confidence that came from knowing his own worth. "Because everything I've done for the past 15 years has been about protecting people. In the Army, I kept my soldiers alive through 3 combat deployments. I made decisions under fire that saved lives. Since then, I've kept those same skills sharp doing security work wherever I could find it. I know how to assess threats, plan for contingencies, and respond when things go wrong. More than that, I know how to lead a team. Security isn't just about locks and cameras. It's about people trusting each other and working together." He paused, then added, "And I'm hungry. Not for power or status, but for the chance to do work that matters again. To use my skills for something more than just getting by. You're offering me that chance, and I won't waste it." Eleanor studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she set down her tablet and leaned back in her chair. "There's something else you should know. Friday night wasn't random." Jason felt his attention sharpen. "What do you mean?" "The man who attacked me, he knew my name. Before you arrived, when he first grabbed me, he said, 'Ms. Morgan, your company owes me.' I didn't tell the police that part because I wasn't sure if it was relevant or just paranoid thinking." "It's relevant," Jason said immediately. "Very relevant. Did you recognize his voice?" "No, but I've been going through my memory all weekend, trying to remember anyone who might have cause to target me specifically. The truth is, there are a lot of possibilities. We manage investments. Sometimes people lose money. Sometimes we have to make hard decisions that cost people their jobs or their businesses. It comes with the territory. Jason's mind was already working through implications. You need to tell the police. And you need enhanced security until they catch this guy. I've already increased building security, but that's part of why this position exists. I need someone I can trust to take a comprehensive look at our vulnerabilities and fix them. Someone who won't just go through the motions, but will actually care about keeping people safe. She leaned forward, and Jason saw something he recognized in her eyes. It was the same thing he'd seen in his soldiers' faces when they were about to go on a dangerous mission. Determination mixed with an edge of fear that came from knowing the risks were real. I'm not asking you to be my personal bodyguard, Eleanor said, but I'm asking you to make sure something like Friday night doesn't happen again, to anyone in this company. Can you do that? Yes, Jason said without hesitation. When do I start? Eleanor smiled, genuine warmth breaking through the CEO facade. Is 2 weeks too soon? That will give you time to transition out of your current work and arrange childcare for the new schedule. 2 weeks is perfect. They spent the next hour going over details, start date, paperwork, background checks that Jason knew he'd pass without issue. Eleanor introduced him to Patricia, who would handle the administrative side of his onboarding, and then to Marcus Webb, the interim head of security who'd been doing the job part-time while they searched for a permanent replacement. Marcus was a former cop in his 60s, solid and professional, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of dealing with humanity's worst. He gave Jason a firm handshake and an evaluating look. Military? He asked. Army, 12 years. Marcus nodded approval. Good. We need that discipline here. The previous head of security was corporate through and through, never saw real danger. When something actually happened, he froze. That's why Miss Morgan's looking for someone with field experience. What happened? Jason asked. 6 months ago, we had a break-in. Someone bypassed our systems and accessed the server room. They didn't take anything, just planted monitoring devices. By the time we discovered them, they'd been collecting data for weeks. Miss Morgan fired the security head the next day. Jason filed that information away. Industrial espionage was a different kind of threat than he was used to, but the principles were the same. Identify vulnerabilities, harden defenses, prepare for the worst. Marcus showed him around the building, pointing out cameras, access points, patrol routes. The security setup was decent, but not exceptional. Good enough for normal circumstances, but full of gaps that someone determined could exploit. Jason's mind was already cataloging needed improvements. They ended the tour back on the 28th floor, and Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. You got good instincts, I can tell. This place needs that. Ms. Morgan especially needs that. You sound protective of her, Jason observed. She's the best boss I've ever had, and I've had a lot of them. Fair, direct, expects a lot, but gives a lot in return. She's also got enemies, same as anyone with power. Your job will be making sure those enemies stay at a distance. After Marcus left, Jason found himself back in Eleanor's office. She'd been in meetings for most of the afternoon, but Patricia had texted him saying Ms. Morgan wanted to see him before he left. Eleanor was on a phone call when he entered, gesturing for him to sit while she finished up. Jason watched her work, fascinated by the transformation from the woman who'd sat across from him at dinner to this force of nature making decisions with casual authority. She was negotiating something complex, throwing around terms like basis points and liquidity positions that meant nothing to Jason but clearly meant everything to whoever was on the other end of the line. Done, she said finally, hanging up and turning her full attention to him. Some of the corporate armor had cracked, and she looked tired. Sorry about that. Closing a deal that's been in progress for months. No apologies necessary. It's impressive watching you work. Eleanor laughed, but there was an edge to it. Impressive or terrifying? Some people say I'm too direct, too hard, especially for a woman. You're a CEO. You're supposed to be hard. That's what I tell myself. She stood and moved to the windows, looking out over the city. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Friday night, when you tackled that man, did you think about your son? About what might happen to him if you got hurt? Jason considered the question carefully. No, I didn't think at all. I just acted. That's what scares me, Eleanor said quietly. Not that you acted, but that you didn't hesitate. Most people would have calculated the risk. You just did what needed doing. Is that a problem? No. She turned to face him. It's exactly what I need, but it's also what worries me about asking you to take this job, because I know myself, Jason. I know that I'm going to depend on you, probably more than is strictly professional, and that's not fair to you or to your son. Jason stood and crossed to where she stood by the windows. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight she carried that had nothing to do with physical burden. My wife told me something before she died, he said. She said that we don't get to choose when we're needed. We only get to choose whether we show up. I showed up Friday night because you needed help. I'm taking this job because your company needs someone to take security seriously. And if you need to depend on me, that's fine. That's what you're paying me for. Eleanor's eyes glistened with something that might have been tears, but she blinked them away. You're a good man, Jason Brooks. Better than you probably realize. I'm just a guy trying to do right by his kid and make a living. No, she said firmly. You're more than that. You're someone who still believes that doing the right thing matters. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? Before Jason could answer, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at it and sighed. I have to take this. But Jason, thank you. For Friday night, for today, for saying yes. I have a feeling you're going to change things around here. Jason left the building as the afternoon sun angled between skyscrapers, painting downtown in shades of gold and amber. His phone was full of messages from Michelle demanding updates, but he ignored them for now. Instead, he drove to Liam's school and waited in the pickup line, just another parent among dozens. When Liam climbed into the car, he took one look at Jason's face and grinned. You got it! I got it, Jason confirmed, unable to keep the smile off his own face. Pending background checks and paperwork, but yeah, I start in 2 weeks. Liam whooped and punched the air, and Jason laughed, really laughed, for what felt like the first time in months. They celebrated with pizza at the cheap place Liam loved, and Jason let him order whatever he wanted without checking prices. It was a small thing, but it felt significant, a marker of things changing. That evening, after Liam was in bed, Jason sat on his couch with a beer and called Michelle. She picked up immediately. Tell me everything right now or I'm coming over there. So he did, walking her through the entire day from the moment he'd entered the Morgan Holdings building to the conversation with Eleanor by the windows. Michelle listened without interrupting, and when he finished, there was a long pause. Jason, this is huge. This is your life changing. I know. So why do you sound worried? Because he was worried, though he'd been trying not to examine exactly why. It's a lot of responsibility, a lot of people depending on me. You had 100 soldiers depending on you in Afghanistan. You handled that. That was different. I knew what I was doing there. This is corporate security, corporate politics. I'm out of my depth. You're always out of your depth at first, Michelle said pragmatically. That's how you learn to swim. Besides, it sounds like this Eleanor woman believes in you. That counts for something. Jason thought about Eleanor by the windows, confessing her fear that she'd depend on him too much. There was something developing between them, some connection that went deeper than employer and employee. He wasn't naive enough to pretend otherwise, but he also wasn't sure what to do about it. She's complicated, he said finally. Good. Complicated people are interesting. You've been living a simple, safe life for 3 years, Jason. Maybe it's time for complicated. After they hung up, Jason pulled out his laptop and started making lists. Things he needed to research about corporate security. Questions he had for Marcus. Improvements he'd already identified in the building's defenses. He worked until past midnight, fueled by excitement and purpose he'd forgotten he could feel. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Jason gave notice to the rideshare company, finished up his last security consulting jobs, and spent hours online studying corporate security protocols and best practices. He also spent time with Liam, making sure his son understood that the new job meant regular hours, but also meant Dad would be home for dinner every night. And I can actually come to your school events now, Jason said one evening while they were making dinner together. No more missing your concerts or field trips because I'm working. Liam's face lit up. Really? You'll come to my science fair presentation? I'll be in the front row. The science fair was that Friday, 2 days before Jason's start date. He sat through 20 presentations by 9-year-olds explaining volcanoes, solar systems, and plant growth with the deadly seriousness only children could muster. When it was Liam's turn to present his project on simple machines, Jason watched his son explain levers and pulleys with confidence and pride, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. Sarah should have been here for this. She'd been the one who loved school events, who'd volunteered for every field trip and bake sale. Jason was doing his best, but he knew there were gaps. Things Liam needed that one parent couldn't provide, no matter how hard they tried. After the fair, as they drove home through Friday evening traffic, Liam said, "Mom would have liked my project." "She would have loved it," Jason agreed. "She'd be so proud of you." "Are you proud of me?" "Every single day, buddy. Every single day." Saturday, Jason's last day before starting at Morgan Holdings, was spent in practical preparation. He bought 3 new shirts and 2 pairs of dress pants, spending more money than he was comfortable with, but knowing he needed to look the part. He got a haircut, the kind of precise military style that had been his standard for years. He even bought a new briefcase, replacing the battered messenger bag he'd been using since leaving the Army. That evening, Michelle came over to watch Liam for what she was calling the new job celebration dinner, though Jason had protested that celebrating before he'd even started was premature. "You're going out with Eleanor tonight, aren't you?" she asked as Jason changed into one of his new shirts. "It's a work dinner. She wants to go over my priorities for the first week." A work dinner on a Saturday night. Jason emerged from his bedroom and gave his sister a level look. "She's my boss, Michelle, that's all." "For now," Michelle said, but she was smiling. "Go have your work dinner. Try to relax and enjoy yourself. You've earned this, Jason. Stop waiting for the other shoe to drop and just let something good happen." The restaurant Eleanor had chosen was different from Tempest, more casual but still upscale. It was a steakhouse with dark wood and leather booths, the kind of place where deals got made over expensive wine and rare cuts of beef. Eleanor was already there when Jason arrived, seated in a corner booth that provided privacy and a view of the entire restaurant. She looked different than she had in the office all week. Less corporate armor, more like the woman he'd had dinner with that first time. Dark jeans, a cream-colored blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders. She smiled when she saw him, and Jason felt something shift in his chest. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as he slid into the booth across from her. "I know it's the weekend, and you probably have better things to do." "Liam's with my sister. I'm all yours." The words came out more intimate than he'd intended, and he saw awareness flicker in Eleanor's eyes. But she just smiled and said, "Good, because I wanted to talk to you without the office atmosphere. Get to know the real Jason Brooks before you become my head of security." "What you see is what you get," Jason said. "I'm not complicated." "Everyone's complicated. They just hide it better, or worse." She poured wine for both of them from the bottle already on the table. "Tell me about your wife, if it's not too painful." Jason hadn't expected that question, but he found himself wanting to answer. She was everything I wasn't. Outgoing where I was reserved, optimistic where I was practical. She made me laugh, made me see the good in things. We met right after I came back from my first deployment. She was a teacher, working with kids who had learning disabilities. He paused, memory washing over him. When she got sick, she never complained. Not once. Even at the end, when the pain was unbearable, she was more worried about me and Liam than herself. She made me promise I wouldn't stop living after she was gone, that I'd find happiness again. "Have you?" Eleanor asked softly. "Found happiness?" "I've found purpose." "That's close enough." Eleanor shook her head. "No, it's not. Purpose gets you through the day. Happiness makes you want tomorrow to come." "What about you?" Jason deflected. "You built an empire from nothing. That must make you happy." "It makes me satisfied, accomplished. But happy?" She swirled wine in her glass, considering. "I don't know if I've ever let myself be happy. I've been too busy proving I deserve to exist in rooms full of people who think I don't belong." "The foster care thing," Jason said, remembering what she'd told him. "The foster care thing," she confirmed. "I aged out of the system with $500, a high school diploma, and a chip on my shoulder the size of Texas. I put myself through community college, then state university, then business school. Every step of the way, people told me I wouldn't make it, that girls from my background didn't become CEOs. She met his eyes directly. So I proved them wrong, built a company that made me richer and more powerful than any of them. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to just be, how to exist without constantly fighting. Is that why Friday night shook you so badly? Jason asked. Because you couldn't fight back effectively? Maybe. Or maybe because it reminded me that all the money and power in the world doesn't matter if you can't walk safely down a street at night. That I'm still vulnerable, still at risk, no matter how many floors up my office is. The waiter arrived then to take their orders, providing a break in the heavy conversation. They both ordered steaks, and Eleanor asked for a side of truffle fries that she admitted were her guilty pleasure indulgence. As the evening progressed, the conversation lightened. They talked about everything and nothing, movies, books, the peculiarities of the city they both called home. A break in the heavy conversation. They both ordered steaks, and Eleanor asked for a side of truffle fries that she admitted were her guilty pleasure indulgence. As the evening progressed, the conversation lightened. They talked about everything and nothing, movies, books, the peculiarities of the city they both called home. Eleanor was funny when she relaxed, with a dry wit that caught Jason off guard and made him laugh more than he had in years. She asked about Liam, seemed genuinely interested in Jason's stories about 9-year-old logic and the challenges of single parenting. "You're good at it," she said over dessert. "Being a father, I can tell from the way you talk about him." "I'm doing my best. Some days that's enough, some days it's not. That's all any of us can do, our best." When the check came, Eleanor waved away Jason's half-hearted attempt to pay. "This one's on me. Consider it a welcome to the company dinner." They walked out together into the cool evening air, and Jason realized he didn't want the night to end. That was dangerous thinking, he knew. She was his boss. There were power dynamics, professional boundaries that needed to stay intact. But standing there under the streetlights with Eleanor looking up at him, those boundaries felt very theoretical and very distant. "I should go," he said, not moving. "Early start Monday morning." "Yes," Eleanor agreed, also not moving. "Big day for both of us." They stood there for a moment longer, something unspoken hanging between them. Then Eleanor stepped forward and hugged him, quick and fierce. Jason's arms came up automatically, holding her, and for just a second she let herself lean into him. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. "For everything, for Friday night, for taking this job, for tonight." "You make me feel safe, Jason. That's not something I feel very often." Then she pulled back, composed herself, and was CEO Eleanor Morgan again. "I'll see you Monday morning, 8 o'clock sharp." "Yes, ma'am," Jason said, unable to help the slight smile. She rolled her eyes, but smiled back. "We really need to work on that ma'am habit." Jason drove home through Saturday night traffic, his mind replaying the evening, analyzing conversations, trying to make sense of what was happening between them. Because something was happening, whether either of them wanted to acknowledge it or not. He could feel it every time their eyes met, every time the conversation dipped below surface level into something real and raw. But Monday morning, all of that would have to be set aside. He'd be her employee, her head of security, responsible for keeping her and 300 other people safe. Personal feelings had no place in that dynamic. He needed to lock this down, keep it professional, maintain appropriate distance. He just wasn't sure he could. Michelle was asleep on his couch when he got home, and Liam was tucked into bed. Jason stood in his son's doorway for a long moment, watching him sleep, thinking about the life he was about to provide for this kid. Stability. Security. A father who came home at normal hours and could afford more than just the basics, but also thinking about Eleanor's words. Purpose gets you through the day. Happiness makes you want tomorrow to come. Maybe, just maybe, he was about to find both. Monday morning arrived with all the weight of new beginnings. Jason woke before his alarm, adrenaline already flooding his system. He went through his routine with military precision, shower, shave, dress in one of his new shirts and his best suit. He made Liam breakfast, walked him to the bus stop, and arrived at the Morgan Holdings building at 7:30, a full half hour before he needed to be there. The morning security guard recognized him from his interview and waved him through with a nod of respect. Jason took the elevator up to the 28th floor, where Patricia was already at her desk despite the early hour. "Mr. Brooks, welcome to your first day," she said warmly. "Ms. Morgan is in early meetings, but she asked me to get you set up in your office and introduce you to the security team." His office was on the 27th floor, smaller than Eleanor's, but still impressive by Jason's standards. Windows overlooking the city, a desk with multiple monitors already set up, a conference table for team meetings. It was more space than he knew what to do with. Patricia handed him an ID badge, building access codes, and a company phone. "Your team meeting is at 9. Miss Morgan will join you at 9:30. Until then, Marcus Webb is waiting to brief you on current protocols and outstanding issues." The next hour was a whirlwind of information. Marcus introduced Jason to the 8-person security team, a mix of former military and police, all competent professionals who sized up their new boss with careful eyes. Jason could read their skepticism. He was younger than most of them, unknown quantity, brought in by the CEO after a dramatic rescue. They were waiting to see if he could actually do the job. At 9:30 exactly, Eleanor walked into the conference room and the entire energy shifted. Everyone sat up straighter, conversations stopped. She commanded attention without saying a word, just by her presence. "Good morning," she said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "I see you've all met Jason Brooks, our new head of security. I expect you to give him your full cooperation and respect. He has my complete confidence, and his decisions regarding security protocols have my backing." She turned to Jason. "The floor is yours." It was a test, Jason realized. A way to see how he'd handle leadership in front of his team and his boss simultaneously. He stood, moved to the whiteboard, and began outlining his assessment of their current security posture and his priorities for improvement. He spoke for 20 minutes, detailing vulnerabilities he'd identified, proposing solutions, assigning initial tasks to team members. He was direct but not harsh, confident but not arrogant. And slowly, he saw the skepticism in his team's faces shift to attention, then to respect. When he finished, Eleanor stood. "Questions?" There were several, all good ones, which Jason answered thoroughly. Then Eleanor nodded. "Excellent, make it happen." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Jason, a word in my office when you're done here." After she left, Marcus grinned at Jason. "You just passed the test. She does that with every new executive, throws them in the deep end to see if they swim." "Did I swim?" Jason asked. "Like a damn Olympian." The team dispersed to begin their assigned tasks, and Jason headed up to the 28th floor. Patricia waved him through to Eleanor's office, where she stood by her windows, looking out over the city she'd conquered through sheer determination. "That was well done," she said without turning around. "You're a natural leader. They'll follow you." "Thank you." Now she did turn, and Jason saw something in her expression that made his breath catch. Admiration mixed with something warmer, something that had no place in a professional relationship but existed anyway. "Jason, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." "Okay." Eleanor took a breath, seeming to steel herself. "I hired you because you're qualified. That's the truth. But I also hired you because when I look at you, I see someone I can trust in a world where trust is a rare commodity. You make me feel safe, and that's not something I ever expected to feel around anyone." She held up a hand as Jason started to speak. "I know this is inappropriate. I know there are power dynamics and professional boundaries. I know that I'm your boss and this conversation shouldn't be happening. But I also know that life is short and uncertain, and if Friday night taught me anything, it's that we don't always get second chances." Jason's heart was hammering. "Eleanor, I'm not asking for anything," she interrupted. "I'm just telling you where I stand. What you do with that information is up to you. But I needed you to know. I needed you to understand that this, whatever this is between us, it's real for me. And it started the moment you tackled that man in the street without hesitating, without calculating the cost." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and danger and the weight of choices that would change everything. Jason crossed the space between them in 3 strides and stood close enough that he could see the pulse beating in her throat. "Sarah made me promise I wouldn't stop living after she was gone. For 3 years, I've been keeping that promise in the technical sense, existing, surviving, functioning. But I haven't been living. He reached out and took Eleanor's hand. Until Friday night, when I looked into your eyes and felt something wake up inside me that I thought had died with my wife. So if you're asking where I stand with you. Complicated, inappropriate, professionally questionable, I don't care. I stand with you. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears she didn't bother hiding. This is crazy. Probably, Jason agreed. We should keep it professional, set boundaries, do the smart thing. Probably. But we're not going to, are we? Not a chance, Jason said, and kissed her. The kiss lasted only a moment before Eleanor pulled back, her hand coming up to touch her lips like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Jason stood there, his own heart racing, suddenly aware of how completely he'd just obliterated every professional boundary that should have existed between them. We can't, Eleanor whispered, but she hadn't stepped away. Jason, I'm your boss. This is exactly what we said we wouldn't do. I know. His voice was rough. But I'm not sorry. She looked up at him, conflict written clearly across her face. I'm not either. That's the problem. Before either of them could say anything more, Patricia's voice came through the intercom on Eleanor's desk. Ms. Morgan, your 945 is here. The Henderson acquisition team. Reality crashed back in with the force of a cold wave. Eleanor stepped back, smoothing her hair and straightening her suit jacket with practiced efficiency. In seconds, she'd transformed back into CEO Eleanor Morgan, all traces of vulnerability locked away behind professional armor. Send them to conference room A. I'll be right there. She turned to Jason, and her voice was steady, but her eyes were still turbulent. We need to talk about this. Really talk. But not now. Not here. Tonight? Jason asked. Tonight. My place. 7 o'clock. She scribbled an address on a piece of paper and handed it to him. And Jason, we keep this completely separate from work. Whatever happens between us personally, it doesn't affect how we operate professionally. Understood? Understood. Eleanor moved past him toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. For what it's worth, I haven't felt this terrified and this alive at the same time in years. Then she was gone, leaving Jason standing in her office trying to process what had just happened. He'd kissed his boss on his first day of work. He'd confessed feelings that could complicate everything, and he'd agreed to go to her home that evening to figure out what the hell they were doing. Michelle was going to kill him. Jason returned to his office and threw himself into work, needing the distraction. He spent the rest of the morning reviewing security footage, identifying patterns and building traffic, and meeting one-on-one with each member of his team to understand their strengths and concerns. By lunch, he'd already drafted a preliminary report on security upgrades that needed immediate attention. Marcus stopped by around 1 with sandwiches from the deli across the street. Figured you'd forget to eat, being first day and all. Thanks, Jason said, genuinely grateful. He hadn't realized how hungry he was until food appeared in front of him. Marcus settled into the chair across from Jason's desk, unwrapping his own sandwich. So, you and Miss Morgan. Jason nearly choked on his first bite. What? Easy, kid. I'm not blind, and I've been doing this work for 30 years. I see how you look at each other, just wanted to give you some friendly advice. Marcus took a bite and chewed thoughtfully. Keep it separate. Work is work, personal is personal. The moment you let them blur together, things get messy. And messy in a building like this can end careers. There's nothing, Jason started, but Marcus held up a hand. I'm not judging. Hell, if I was 30 years younger and she looked at me the way she looks at you, I'd be doing the exact same thing. Just be smart about it. Protect her reputation, protect yours, and most importantly, protect the team. They need to respect you as their boss, not see you as the guy sleeping with the CEO. Jason wanted to argue, to defend himself, but Marcus was right. If this thing with Eleanor was going to happen, and it apparently was, they needed to be incredibly careful about how they handled it. Noted, Jason said. And for the record, nothing's happened. Yet, Marcus said with a knowing smile. But it will. That kind of chemistry doesn't just disappear because it's inconvenient. After Marcus left, Jason tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting to 7 o'clock. To Eleanor's apartment, to the conversation they needed to have about what they were doing and why it was probably a terrible idea, but neither of them seemed able to stop it. His phone rang at 3. Michelle. "How's the first day?" she asked without preamble. "Complicated." "Complicated how?" Jason glanced at his office door, making sure it was closed. "I may have kissed Eleanor." The silence on the other end lasted approximately 3 seconds before Michelle exploded. "You what? Jason Christopher Brooks, tell me you did not kiss your boss on your first day of work." "Technically, she kissed me back, so it was mutual." "That's not better. That's worse. That's so much worse." Michelle took a breath, clearly trying to calm herself. Okay, tell me everything, from the beginning." So Jason did, keeping his voice low and his door locked, walking Michelle through the morning meeting, Eleanor's confession in her office, the kiss, and the plan to meet at her apartment that evening. When he finished, Michelle was quiet for a long moment. "You really like her?" "Yeah," Jason admitted. "I really do." "And she likes you?" "Seems that way." "Then here's what you're going to do. Tonight, you're going to have an honest conversation about what you both want and what the boundaries need to be. You're going to be smart about this because I know you, Jason. When you commit to something, you commit completely, but you also have Liam to think about and a career that you finally got back on track. Don't let passion override common sense." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been this wise. You just never listened before." Michelle's voice softened. "I'm happy for you, big brother. Scared out of my mind, but happy. You deserve this. You deserve to feel alive again. Just be careful, okay?" "I will, promise." After they hung up, Jason forced himself to focus on work for the rest of the afternoon. He held another team meeting at 4, went over the preliminary security upgrade plan, and assigned Marcus to start getting quotes from vendors. He responded to emails, studied building schematics, and tried to look like someone whose world hadn't just tilted on its axis that morning. At 6, he headed home to shower, change, and check on Liam. His son was at the kitchen table doing homework when Jason walked in. "How was school?" Jason asked, ruffling Liam's hair. "Boring. How was work?" "Interesting. Very interesting." Jason grabbed a water from the fridge. "Listen, I have a work dinner tonight. Aunt Michelle's going to come over and hang out with you." Liam looked up, suspicious. "Another work dinner? You had one of those Saturday." "I'm the new guy. Lots of meetings." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it felt like one. "Is it with that lady? The one from the hotel?" Jason froze. "How do you know about that?" "I heard you and Aunt Michelle talking. You saved someone from a robber." Liam's eyes were bright with interest. "That's so cool, Dad. You're like a superhero." "I'm not a superhero, buddy. I just did what anyone should do. But most people wouldn't. That's what makes it cool." Liam returned to his homework, then added casually, "Is she pretty?" "Who?" "The lady you saved, the one you're having work dinners with." Jason sat down across from his son, recognizing that this conversation was more important than Liam's innocent tone suggested. "Yeah, she's pretty, but that's not why I'm having dinner with her. She's my boss, and we need to discuss work stuff." "Okay." Liam didn't look convinced. "But if you like her, that would be okay. You know that, right?" Jason felt his throat tighten. "What makes you think I like her?" "Because you smile different when you talk about her, like how you used to smile about Mom, but not exactly the same. It's a new smile." 9 years old and already reading him like a book. Jason reached across the table and took Liam's hand. "Your mom will always be special to me. Nobody could ever replace her." "I know, but she's gone, Dad. And you're still here. You're allowed to be happy." The words were almost exactly what Sarah had said to him in the hospital, during one of her last lucid moments. She'd gripped his hand and told him that he was allowed to be happy again, that she wanted him to be happy, that loving someone new wouldn't diminish what they'd had together. "When did you get so smart?" Jason asked, his voice rough. "I've always been smart. You just never noticed." Liam grinned, and for a moment, Jason saw Sarah in that grin, in the intelligence and compassion that his son carried. Michelle arrived at 6:30, and Jason changed into jeans and a nice shirt, trying to strike a balance between casual and making an effort. As he checked himself in the mirror, he realized his hands were shaking slightly. nervous. He was actually nervous about seeing Eleanor, like he was 17 again going on a first date. The drive to Eleanor's address took him into a neighborhood he'd expected. Upscale, historic, the kind of place where old money had built mansions a century ago and new money renovated them into modern showcases. Her building was a converted brownstone divided into luxury condos, the kind of place where the doorman wore a uniform and actually opened doors. Jason Brooks for Eleanor Morgan, he told the doorman, who checked his tablet and nodded. Ms. Morgan is expecting you, penthouse level. Of course it was the penthouse. Jason rode the elevator up, his heart rate increasing with each floor. When the doors opened, Eleanor was standing in her doorway wearing jeans and a soft sweater, her hair loose, her feet bare. She looked younger like this, more approachable, less like a corporate titan and more like just a woman. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with everything that had happened that morning and everything that might happen now. Then Eleanor stepped back. "Come in, please." Her apartment was stunning, but somehow not cold despite the obvious expense. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city at night. The furniture was modern but comfortable, with soft throws and actual books on the shelves, rather than just decorative objects. Photos hung on the walls, mostly landscapes, but a few that looked personal. It felt lived in, real, like Eleanor had actually built a home here, rather than just a showplace. "Wine?" Eleanor asked, moving to the kitchen. "Please." She poured 2 glasses of red, handed him one, and then led him to the couch by the windows. They sat at opposite ends, the space between them feeling vast and charged at the same time. "I've been thinking about this all day," Eleanor said, staring into her wine glass. "About what happened this morning, about what I said, about that kiss. And I keep coming back to the same question. What are we doing?" "I don't know," Jason admitted, "but I know I don't want to stop doing it." Eleanor smiled slightly. "That's the problem. Neither do I. But Jason, we have to be realistic. I'm the CEO of a major firm. You're my employee. There are power dynamics, potential conflicts of interest, and about 1,000 ways this could blow up in both our faces." "I know all that." "And you don't care?" Jason set down his wine glass and shifted closer to her. "I care. But I also know that life is short and unpredictable. I watched my wife die over the course of 8 months. Every day watching her fade, watching the person I loved disappear piece by piece. It taught me that you can't control everything, you can't plan for everything, and sometimes you just have to grab onto whatever good comes your way and hold on tight." He took Eleanor's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "You're good, Eleanor. Being around you, talking to you, it makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt since Sarah died. I'd be an idiot to walk away from that because of power dynamics and professional concerns." "But what about Liam?" Eleanor asked quietly. "You have a son who needs stability. Getting involved with me, it could complicate his life." "Liam told me tonight that I was allowed to be happy, that his mom would want that." Jason smiled. "He's 9 and already wiser than I am." Eleanor set down her own glass and moved closer until they were sitting knee to knee. "I haven't done this in a long time. Relationship things. I don't know if I remember how. Makes 2 of us. We'll figure it out together." "There have to be rules," Eleanor said. "Boundaries. At work, we're completely professional. No one can know we're involved, at least not yet. I won't have people saying I promoted you or gave you special treatment because we're sleeping together." "Agreed. At work, you're my boss and I'm your employee. Nothing more. And we take this slow. I know we're both adults and this chemistry is intense, but we take it slow anyway. Get to know each other properly before we jump into anything serious." "I can do slow," Jason said, though the way Eleanor was looking at him made slow seem like an impossible goal. "One more thing," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I'm scared, Jason. I'm scared of how much I already feel for you. I'm scared of getting hurt, of hurting you, of this ending badly and losing not just whatever this is between us, but also the best head of security I've ever had." Jason cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I'm scared too. Terrified, actually, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone. So let's be scared together." This time when they kissed, it was slower, deeper, neither of them pulling away. Eleanor's hands fisted in Jason's shirt, pulling him closer, and he wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her easily into his lap. They stayed like that for a long time, kissing and touching with the desperate intensity of two people who'd been alone too long and had finally found someone who understood. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eleanor rested her forehead against Jason's. "So much for taking it slow." "We're taking it slow," Jason said. "This is just kissing. Very enthusiastic kissing." Eleanor laughed, and the sound was unguarded and genuine. "I like you, Jason Brooks. More than is probably wise." The feeling's mutual. They spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, about everything and nothing. Eleanor told him about growing up in foster care, bouncing between homes, never quite belonging anywhere. She told him about the teacher who'd seen something in her and pushed her to apply to college, about working 3 jobs to pay for school, about the moment she'd decided to start her own company instead of making other people rich. Jason told her about meeting Sarah in college, about their wedding that had been held in his mother's backyard because they couldn't afford anything fancier, about the decision to join the army and how Sarah had supported him, even when it meant months apart. He told her about Liam's birth, about deployment schedules that made him miss first words and first steps, about the guilt that still haunted him for all the moments he'd missed. "You're a good father," Eleanor said when he finished. "Liam's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have him. He keeps me grounded, gives me purpose." "I'd like to meet him. Properly, I mean, not just in passing." Jason felt something warm settle in his chest. He'd like that. Fair warning, though, he's already suspicious that something's going on between us. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. It was past 11 when Jason finally stood to leave. Eleanor walked him to the door, and they stood there like teenagers reluctant to end a first date. "Tomorrow at work," Eleanor said. "We pretend this didn't happen. Complete professionals. I'm serious, Jason. If we're going to do this, we have to be flawless at work. No lingering looks, no special treatment, nothing that could make people suspicious." I understand. I'll be the perfect employee." "You better be, because I'm going to be a demanding boss." Eleanor smiled, took his face in her hands, and kissed him one more time. "Now, go home before I convince myself that this is all a terrible idea." Jason drove home through empty streets, his mind replaying the evening on loop. He felt like he was standing on the edge of something, a precipice that he could either step back from or jump off completely. There was no middle ground with Eleanor. She was all or nothing, and Jason was realizing that he wanted all. Michelle was asleep on his couch again when he got home, but this time she woke when he walked in. She took one look at his face and smiled. "You've got it bad." "Yeah," Jason admitted, "I really do." "Is she worth it? The complications, the risk?" Jason thought about Eleanor's laugh, her intelligence, the way she looked at him like he was someone worth seeing. Every bit of it. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both natural and surreal. At work, Jason was the consummate professional. He overhauled the security system with Marcus's help, implementing new protocols and training programs. He dealt with minor crises like false alarms and forgotten access badges with calm efficiency. He led his team with the same competence he'd once led soldiers, earning their respect through action rather than authority. And he never, not once, gave any indication that he was involved with Eleanor Morgan. At work, they were boss and employee. Eleanor was demanding, pushing Jason to deliver better results faster, challenging his recommendations, never cutting him slack. In meetings, she was all business. In the hallways, she barely acknowledged him beyond professional courtesies. To anyone watching, they were exactly what they appeared to be: CEO and security chief, nothing more. But 3 nights a week, sometimes 4, Jason went to Eleanor's apartment after Liam was in bed. They'd talk for hours, learning each other's histories and quirks and dreams. Sometimes they'd cook dinner together, Eleanor proving surprisingly competent in the kitchen despite admitting she usually just ordered takeout. Sometimes they'd watch movies, curled up on her couch like normal people instead of a CEO and former soldier navigating an impossible relationship. And slowly, carefully, they built something real. A month into his new job, Jason brought Liam to meet Eleanor officially. They went to an arcade, of all places, Eleanor's idea because she'd never been to one as a kid and wanted to see what she'd missed. Jason watched his son and the woman he was falling for compete on racing games and air hockey, both of them trash-talking with the kind of ease that suggested they'd known each other for years instead of hours. "She's cool," Liam declared on the drive home, his arms full of prizes Eleanor had won for him. "You should definitely keep her." "I'm working on it, buddy." "Good. She makes you smile the new smile all the time now." But the happiness couldn't last untested. 6 weeks into Jason's tenure at Morgan Holdings, reality came crashing back in the form of the man in the ski mask. It was a Tuesday afternoon, normal in every way, until Jason's phone rang with an internal extension he didn't recognize. He answered automatically. "Jason Brooks, security." Heavy breathing on the other end, then a distorted voice, electronic and menacing. "Tell Ms. Morgan she can't hide behind bodyguards forever. What she took from me, I'll take from her. And everyone she cares about." The line went dead. Jason was on his feet instantly, his military training kicking in. He called Marcus. "Lock down the building, now. Nobody in or out without clearance." "What's happening?" "Credible threat against Ms. Morgan. I'm going to her office. Get me footage from every exterior camera for the last 10 minutes. Jason took the stairs 2 at a time up to the 28th floor, his heart hammering not with fear but with cold, focused determination. Patricia stood when she saw him coming. "Where is she?" Jason asked. "Conference room B, finishing a meeting with—" Jason was already moving. He opened the conference room door without knocking, interrupting Eleanor mid-sentence. 6 executives stared at him in shock, but Jason only had eyes for Eleanor. "We need to talk, now, privately." Eleanor's eyes narrowed at the interruption, but she must have seen something in his face because she stood immediately. "Gentlemen, we'll continue this in 30 minutes. She followed Jason to her office, and the moment the door closed, her professional mask dropped. "What happened?" "I got a threat call. Electronic voice, distorted but clear. They mentioned what you took from them. They mentioned hurting people you care about." Jason moved to her windows, checking sight lines, angles, exposure. "It's the same person from the robbery, has to be." Eleanor had gone pale, but her voice was steady. "What did they say exactly?" Jason repeated the message word for word and watched Eleanor's face as she processed it. He saw fear flash across her features, quickly buried under determination. "Okay," she said. "What do we do?" "First, you're going to tell me everything about anyone who might have cause to target you. Business deals gone bad, fired employees, rejected investors, everything. Then I'm calling the detective who handled your robbery case and bringing them up to speed. And then you're getting a personal security detail until we figure out who this is." "Jason, I can't walk around with bodyguards. It looks weak." "It looks smart," Jason countered. "Someone threatened you, on my watch. That's not happening again." Eleanor studied him for a long moment, and Jason saw the moment she stopped being CEO and became just Eleanor, the woman who'd been terrified in the street 6 weeks ago. "Okay, I trust you. Tell me what you need." They spent the next 2 hours going through Eleanor's recent business history, compiling a list of people who might hold grudges. The list was longer than Jason liked. Over 30 names ranging from investors who'd lost money to executives Eleanor had fired to competitors she'd outmaneuvered on major deals. Each name went into Jason's database with notes on threat level and motive. Detective Patterson arrived at 4, along with her partner Mills. Jason briefed them on the call, provided the phone records showing the trace, and handed over his preliminary threat assessment. Patterson listened with the focused attention of someone who took threats seriously. "This escalates things," she said. "The robbery might have seemed opportunistic, but a follow-up threat like this suggests obsession. Someone's been watching Ms. Morgan, learning her patterns. They knew how to reach your direct line, Mr. Brooks. That's inside knowledge." "You think someone internal made the threat?" Eleanor asked. "I think someone internal gave information to whoever made it, or they're working together." Patterson turned to Jason. "I need full access to your building security, employee records, recent hires, and terminations. Everything." "You'll have it by end of day," Jason promised. After the detectives left, Jason called his team together for an emergency meeting. He didn't mention the specific threat, just announced enhanced security protocols effective immediately. Additional patrols, mandatory badge checks, new access restrictions. Marcus would oversee implementation starting the next morning. And one more thing, Jason said, meeting each team member's eyes. If anyone contacts you with questions about Miss Morgan's schedule, her habits, her security detail, anything like that, you report it to me immediately. I don't care if it's a reporter, a friend, another employee, everything gets reported. The team dispersed to their new assignments, and Jason returned to Eleanor's office. She was still working, her focus seemingly unshakable despite the threat hanging over her. But Jason could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked to the windows more often than usual. "You're staying at my place tonight," Jason said. It wasn't a question. Eleanor looked up. "Jason, I can't just move in with you. It's one night, until I can arrange proper security at your apartment. And before you argue, this isn't about us. This is about me doing my job. If you were any other executive under active threat, I'd be insisting on the same thing. Would you be offering your own home? If it was the most secure location available, yes." Which was actually true. Jason's apartment might be modest, but it was in a building with good security, and more importantly, no one knew about it. Eleanor's penthouse was public knowledge, listed in property records, featured in a magazine spread about successful women's homes. Eleanor sighed. "Fine, one night, but this is purely professional." "Purely professional," Jason agreed, though they both knew it wasn't. They left the building together after most employees had gone home, Jason hyper-aware of their surroundings in a way he hadn't been since his military days. Every person on the street was a potential threat, every car a possible tail. He'd slipped back into combat mindset without even trying, and part of him was grateful for the clarity it brought. At his apartment, Eleanor met Michelle, who'd arrived early to watch Liam and stayed when Jason texted about the situation. His sister took one look at Eleanor's face and immediately switched into nurturing mode. "You're safe here," Michelle said firmly. "Jason might drive me crazy sometimes, but he's the best at what he does. Nobody's getting to you." Liam appeared from his room, stopping short when he saw Eleanor. "Are you staying for dinner?" "Looks like it," Eleanor said, managing a smile. "If that's okay with you." "Totally okay. Can you help me with my math homework after?" "Dad's terrible at fractions." "I am not terrible at fractions," Jason protested. "You are, though," Michelle said. "Remember when you tried to help him with that baking recipe and used wrong measurements?" Eleanor laughed, and some of the tension eased from her shoulders. They ordered pizza, and while they ate, Eleanor helped Liam with homework while Jason and Michelle talked quietly in the kitchen. "Someone threatened her?" Michelle asked, keeping her voice low. "Yeah, and it's serious, Mash. This person knows too much about our building, about our schedule. It's not random." "You'll figure it out. You always do." Michelle squeezed his arm. "But Jason, be careful. You're in love with her. That makes you vulnerable." Jason started to deny it, then stopped. Was he in love with Eleanor? He thought about the way his heart jumped when he saw her, the way he couldn't imagine his days without her in them, the fierce protectiveness that had roared to life the moment he'd heard that threatening voice on the phone. "Yeah," he admitted quietly. "I think I am." "Does she know?" "We haven't said it. Maybe you should. Life's short and all that." After Michelle left and Liam was in bed, Jason set Eleanor up in his room despite her protest that she'd take the couch. He gave her spare clothes to sleep in, showed her where everything was, and tried to ignore how right it felt having her in his space. "Thank you," Eleanor said, standing in his bedroom doorway looking small and tired. "For today, for tonight, for everything." "It's my job." "No, it's more than that. You protect everyone, but with me it's different. I can feel it." Jason crossed to her, unable to stay away. "Because it is different. Because you're not just someone I work for, Eleanor. You're—" "I'm what?" "Everything," he said simply. "You're everything." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared, Jason. I've built this life through sheer force of will, convinced myself I didn't need anyone, that being alone was safer. And then you tackled a man in the street for me, and suddenly I'm not alone anymore. Suddenly I have something to lose. You're not going to lose me, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you. You can't promise that. Watch me." They stood there in his doorway, holding each other while the city hummed outside, and Liam slept peacefully down the hall. Two people who'd been broken in different ways, finding wholeness in each other. Two people who'd built walls to keep the world out, slowly dismantling them brick by brick. "I love you," Eleanor whispered into his shoulder. "I didn't mean to. I tried not to. But I do." Jason pulled back just enough to see her face. "I love you too. Have for weeks, probably. Just didn't know how to say it." They kissed then, soft and slow, a promise more than passion, a commitment to whatever came next, threats and complications and impossible odds included. Later, after Eleanor had fallen asleep in his bed and Jason had taken the couch, he lay awake staring at the ceiling and thinking about the threat. Someone out there wanted to hurt Eleanor, wanted to take from her what she'd apparently taken from them, and Jason was going to find them before they got the chance. He pulled out his phone and started making notes, connections, possibilities. The voice had been electronically distorted, which meant premeditation. They'd called his direct line, which meant inside knowledge of the company directory. They'd mentioned what Eleanor had taken, which suggested financial motive. Lost money, lost opportunity, lost something valuable. Jason thought back through the list they'd compiled that afternoon. 30 names, but some stood out more than others. Derek Hansen, a former VP Eleanor had fired for cause after discovering he'd been skimming funds. Linda Martinez, an investor who'd lost big when Eleanor pulled out of a deal that later collapsed. Thomas Wright, a competitor who'd bid against Eleanor for a major acquisition and lost. One of them, or someone connected to them, was behind this. Jason was sure of it, and he was going to prove it. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Building footage shows unmarked van parked across the street for 47 minutes this afternoon. Left right after the threat call came in." "Running plates now," Jason responded immediately. "Send me everything. Photos, timestamps, all of it." This was the break they needed. Whoever had made that call had been watching the building, waiting for the right moment. They'd made a mistake, stayed too long, gotten caught on camera. And mistakes were what brought people down. Jason worked through the night, cross-referencing footage with the threat assessment list, building a profile of their suspect. By the time dawn broke through his windows, he had a theory, and by the time Eleanor emerged from his bedroom wearing his old army t-shirt and looking rumpled and beautiful, he had a plan. "Morning," she said, moving to where he sat surrounded by papers and laptop screens. "Did you sleep at all?" "I'll sleep when we catch this guy." Jason pulled her down into his lap, needing to touch her, to reassure himself she was safe. "I think I know who it is, or at least who hired someone to make the threat." Eleanor stiffened. "Who?" "Thomas Wright. He's the only one on our list with both motive and means. You beat him on the Henderson acquisition last month, cost him probably $50 million in projected revenue. His company's been struggling since. And get this, he has a brother who did time for stalking and harassment. You think the brother made the call? I think Wright hired someone to scare you, maybe try to leverage information or force you to back out of upcoming deals. The robbery was probably the first attempt. Grab your phone or tablet, get access to confidential information. When that failed because I intervened, they escalated to direct threats." Eleanor processed this, her CEO brain clearly working through implications. "Can you prove it?" "Working on it. Marcus is tracing the van, Patterson's pulling Wright's financials, and I'm going to dig into his brother's known associates. If I'm right, we'll have evidence within 48 hours. And if you're wrong, then we keep looking. But Eleanor, I'm not wrong. Everything points to Wright." She turned in his lap to face him directly. "This is what you were in the army, isn't it? This focused, this determined. You were a good soldier." "I was a good officer," Jason corrected. "There's a difference. Soldiers follow orders. Officers make decisions that save lives or cost them. I got very good at making the right decisions." "I'm glad you're on my side." "Always," Jason promised, "for as long as you'll have me." Liam's alarm went off then, signaling the start of a normal day in a life that had become anything but normal. Eleanor went to shower while Jason made breakfast, and for a few minutes they played at being a regular family. 3 people starting their morning together, connected by something more powerful than convenience or circumstance. By the time they left for work, Jason in his car and Eleanor in the rideshare he'd insisted on checking thoroughly, the investigation was already in motion. And Jason Brooks was doing what he did best, protecting the people he loved from threats they couldn't see coming. The hunt was on. And this time, Jason wasn't going to let anyone escape. The unmarked van belonged to a rental company that specialized in commercial vehicles, the kind of anonymous transportation that businesses used for everything from catering deliveries to surveillance operations. Marcus had tracked it down within 6 hours of Jason's request, pulling strings with contacts at the DMV and calling in favors from his years on the force. The renter had used a fake ID and paid cash, which told Jason everything he needed to know about their level of sophistication. Professionals, Marcus said, spreading photographs across Jason's desk Wednesday morning. Or at least professional enough to cover basic tracks. But they made mistakes. Left the van parked too long in one spot. Didn't account for our traffic cameras. Probably assumed we weren't monitoring external threats that closely. Jason studied the photos with the intensity he'd once reserved for enemy positions and hostile territory assessments. The van itself was nondescript, white with no markings, tinted windows that prevented any view of the interior. But in one shot, taken as the vehicle pulled away from the curb, the driver's window was down just enough to show a partial profile. Male, mid-30s, dark hair, sunglasses obscuring most of his features. "Can we enhance this?" Jason asked, tapping the image. "Already sent it to Patterson. She's got tech guys who can work magic with resolution enhancement. We should have something usable by end of day." Jason leaned back in his chair, mind working through scenarios and connections. Thomas Wright had the motive. His brother David Wright had the criminal history, but they needed the link between the Wrights and whoever had been in that van. A paper trail, phone records, something concrete that would hold up in court. "I want 24-hour surveillance on Thomas Wright," Jason said. "Not us. We don't have the resources. But Patterson should be able to get authorization for monitoring based on the threat level." "You really think Wright's behind this?" "Everything points to him. The Henderson acquisition, the timeline, the escalation from physical robbery to phone threats. He's desperate, Marcus. Desperate men do stupid things." Marcus nodded slowly. "I've seen it before. Guy builds his whole identity around success, loses big, can't accept it, starts thinking if he just eliminates the competition, everything will go back to normal. Except it won't, and people get hurt in the process." Jason thought about Eleanor, about the fear in her eyes when she'd heard the threat, about how vulnerable she'd looked wearing his t-shirt that morning. "We're going to stop him before that happens." The rest of Wednesday passed in a blur of coordination and investigation. Jason worked with Patterson to build a case file comprehensive enough to warrant surveillance on Wright. He reviewed every security measure in the building, tightening protocols and rotating guard schedules to eliminate patterns that could be exploited. He had Marcus conduct surprise drills with the team, testing response times and communication procedures. And through it all, he maintained perfect professional distance from Eleanor. In meetings, he addressed her as Miss Morgan. In the hallways, he nodded respectfully but didn't linger. When she requested a security briefing at 3, he delivered it in her office with Patricia present, outlining enhanced protections without mentioning anything personal. But when their eyes met across her desk, Jason saw the trust there, the certainty that he would keep her safe no matter what it cost him. That trust was both a gift and a burden, and he wore it like armor. Eleanor worked late that night, as she often did, and Jason insisted on personally escorting her home. They took his car instead of a rideshare, Jason driving with the hyper-awareness of someone who'd conducted combat patrols through hostile territory. He checked mirrors constantly, varied his route, watched for tails or suspicious vehicles. "You really think they'll try something?" Eleanor asked from the passenger seat. "I think they're escalating. Phone threats are a step up from street robbery. The question is what comes next." Jason glanced at her, seeing the exhaustion in her profile. "When's the last time you slept properly?" "Define properly." "More than 4 hours." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Monday night, at your place." "That's what I thought." Jason made a decision. "You're staying with me again tonight. And before you argue, this isn't negotiable. You need rest, and you won't get it at your place worrying about security." "Jason, I can't keep imposing." "It's not imposing. Liam loves having you around. Michelle thinks you're good for me. And frankly, I sleep better knowing exactly where you are and that you're safe." Eleanor reached across the console and took his hand. "Have I mentioned lately that I'm in love with you?" "Not since this morning. I was starting to worry." She laughed, the sound releasing some of the tension that had been building all day. You're ridiculous. You love it. I really do. They stopped by Eleanor's apartment just long enough for her to pack a bag with work clothes and essentials. Jason checked every room before letting her enter, his hand never far from the weapon he'd started carrying again after the threat. The penthouse was empty, undisturbed, but Jason still felt uneasy about how exposed it was. Too many windows, too many access points, too many ways for someone determined to cause harm. At his apartment, Liam was thrilled to see Eleanor again. He'd apparently been working on a surprise, which turned out to be an elaborate blanket fort constructed in the living room using every pillow and sheet in the apartment. It's a security fortress, Liam explained with the absolute seriousness of a 9-year-old military strategist. See, you can't get in from any side without being detected, and there's an escape tunnel in the back. Eleanor crouched down to examine the fort with equal seriousness. This is exceptional work. Did you account for aerial assault? Liam's eyes widened. I didn't think of that. Critical oversight, but easily fixed with strategic placement of umbrella defenses. Jason watched them work together to fortify the blanket fort, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. Eleanor wasn't just tolerating his son or pretending to be interested. She was genuinely engaged, meeting Liam at his level, taking his concerns seriously. And Liam was responding with the kind of open affection he usually reserved for Michelle. They had dinner in the blanket fort, pizza eaten on paper plates while Liam regaled them with stories from school, and Eleanor shared carefully edited tales from her business world. After Liam went to bed, Jason and Eleanor collapsed on the couch, the blanket fort still standing like a monument to childhood imagination. He's wonderful, Eleanor said, her head on Jason's shoulder. Smart, creative, emotionally intelligent. You've done an amazing job with him. Sarah did most of the heavy lifting in those early years. I was deployed more than I was home. But you're here now, and he knows you'd do anything for him. That's what matters. Jason kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with the lingering smell of pepperoni and cheese. I'd do anything for both of you. You know that, right? Eleanor tilted her face up to look at him. I'm starting to believe it. That's terrifying and wonderful at the same time. They talked late into the night, voices low so as not to wake Liam. Eleanor told Jason about a major deal she was closing next week, one that would cement Morgan Holdings' position as a top-tier investment firm. Jason told her about his plans for the security overhaul, the ways he wanted to modernize their approach, and build a team that could handle anything. You're different here, Eleanor observed, less guarded. I see more of the real you. This is my space, the one place I don't have to be Captain Brooks or head of security Jason. I can just be me. I like this version of you, though I have to admit watching you work in full protective mode is incredibly attractive. Jason raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Extremely so. The way you take command of situations, the absolute confidence, the competence. It's very... She paused, searching for the right word. Hot, Jason supplied with a grin. I was going to say compelling, but hot works too. They kissed then, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that led to hands wandering and breath quickening. But Jason pulled back before things could escalate too far, mindful of his son sleeping down the hall and the complicated reality of their situation. We should probably get some sleep, he said reluctantly. Big day tomorrow. Eleanor sighed but nodded. You take your bed this time. I'll take the couch. Not happening. You're the one who needs actual rest. They argued about it for another 10 minutes before compromising. Jason's bed was big enough for 2 people to share without touching if they were careful. They could be adults about this, maintain appropriate boundaries, get actual sleep while still being in the same space. That lasted approximately 15 minutes before Eleanor rolled toward Jason's warmth, and he automatically wrapped his arms around her. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, 2 people who'd been alone too long finally allowing themselves to hold and be held. Thursday morning brought the break they'd been waiting for. Patterson called Jason's cell at 7, her voice tight with excitement. We've got him, the guy from the van. Facial recognition came through overnight. His name is Marcus Reeves. And yes, before you ask, he has a prior relationship with David Wright. They served time together 5 years ago for a securities fraud scheme. Jason was out of bed and pulling on clothes before Patterson finished talking. Where's he now? That's the best part. We picked him up an hour ago trying to board a flight to Mexico. He's in interrogation right now, and he's already asking for a deal. I'm on my way. Eleanor stirred as Jason moved around the room gathering his things. What's happening? They caught the guy from the van. I need to get to the police station. She was immediately alert, sitting up and pushing hair out of her face. I'm coming with you. Eleanor, he threatened me, Jason. I have a right to be there. Jason wanted to argue, to keep her safely away from all of this, but he recognized the steel in her voice. This was CEO Eleanor, the woman who'd clawed her way to the top and didn't back down from fights. Okay, but we do this by the book. You observe, you don't engage. Understood? Understood. They left a note for Liam, who was still asleep, asking Michelle to come by and get him ready for school. The drive to the police station took 20 minutes through morning traffic, Jason using the time to brief Eleanor on what they knew and what he expected to learn from Reeves. Patterson met them in the lobby, her professional demeanor slipping slightly when she saw them arrive together. Jason caught the moment of calculation in her eyes, the detective putting pieces together about their relationship, but she said nothing beyond a polite greeting. Reeves is in interview room 2, she said, leading them down a hallway lined with closed doors and observation windows. He's been talking for the last hour, seems eager to cut a deal before his lawyer shows up and tells him to shut up. They entered the observation room, which was dimly lit and equipped with a one-way mirror looking into the interrogation space. Marcus Reeves sat at a metal table, handcuffed, looking younger and more scared than Jason had expected. This was no hardened criminal, just a guy who'd made bad choices and was now facing serious consequences. Detective Mills was conducting the interview, his voice calm and measured as he walked Reeves through the timeline. When did David Wright contact him? What was the arrangement? How much was he being paid? What were his instructions regarding Eleanor Morgan? Reeves talked, words tumbling out in his eagerness to cooperate. He'd been hired 3 weeks ago through a mutual contact who knew both him and David Wright. The job was supposed to be simple surveillance at first, just documenting Eleanor's movements and schedule. But then the instructions changed. He was told to send a message to make Eleanor understand that her business decisions had consequences. The robbery was supposed to be clean, Reeves said, his voice plaintive. Just grab her bag, get her phone and tablet, send everything to Wright. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. But someone did interfere, Mills prompted. A man stopped you. Yeah, came out of nowhere, hit me like a truck. I panicked, ran. David was furious when I showed up empty-handed. Said I was useless, that he'd have to escalate. The phone call to Mr. Brooks was David's idea? David's script. He gave me the words to say, the voice distortion software to use. Told me to call after business hours when most people would be gone. Said it would scare her, make her back off from deals that were costing his brother money. Jason felt Eleanor tense beside him. He reached over and took her hand, offering silent support. She squeezed his fingers hard enough to hurt. Mills pressed for more details. Where was David Wright now? Was Thomas Wright aware of his brother's actions? Were there other threats planned? Reeves answered everything, his story consistent and increasingly detailed. By the time Mills finally called for a break, they had enough to arrest both Wright brothers and probably secure convictions. Patterson joined them in the observation room, satisfaction clear on her face. We've got patrol units heading to both Wright's addresses now. This should wrap up clean. Will Reeves testify? Jason asked. He'll do whatever his lawyer tells him to, but yeah, I think so. He's looking at serious time otherwise, and he knows it. Testifying against the Wrights is his only shot at a reduced sentence. Eleanor had been quiet through all of this, processing everything they'd heard. Now she spoke, her voice controlled but edged with anger. Thomas Wright did this because I beat him on one deal? One acquisition? People have done worse for less, Patterson said. In his mind, you didn't just cost him money. You cost him reputation, credibility, his self-image as someone who always wins. That kind of ego doesn't handle failure well. He could have killed me. That man in the street could have had a weapon. Yes, Patterson agreed. He could have. You're very lucky Mr. Brooks was there. Eleanor turned to Jason, and he saw tears threatening in her eyes despite her composure. Can we get out of here? I need air. They left the police station and sat in Jason's car in the parking lot, Eleanor's hands shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Jason held her while she cried angry, frightened tears, all the emotion she'd been holding back since Friday night finally breaking free. "I keep thinking about what could have happened," she said into his shoulder. "If you hadn't been there, if Reeves had succeeded in taking my phone and tablet, they would have had access to everything: client information, deal structures, passwords to accounts worth billions. Or worse, if he'd been armed, if he'd panicked and hurt me. But I was there," Jason said firmly, "and none of that happened. You're safe, Eleanor. The rights are going down. Reeves is cooperating. It's over." "Is it, though? How many other Thomas Wrights are out there? How many people have I angered or hurt or beaten in business deals? How many of them might decide that I'm a problem worth eliminating?" Jason pulled back to look at her directly. "That's fear talking. Yes, your position comes with risks. Yes, there will always be people who resent your success. But you can't live your life afraid of possibilities. You just build good security, stay aware, and keep doing what you're good at." "With you watching my back?" "Always. For as long as you want me there." Eleanor wiped her eyes, composing herself with visible effort. "I'm sorry. I'm not usually this emotional. You just found out someone wanted to hurt you badly enough to hire criminals. You're allowed to be emotional." They sat in silence for a few minutes, Jason just holding Eleanor while she steadied herself. Then her phone rang, Patricia's name on the screen. Eleanor answered on speaker. "Ms. Morgan, I'm sorry to bother you, but the Henderson team is here for the closing meeting. They're asking when you'll arrive." Eleanor checked her watch and swore softly. "I completely forgot. Tell them I'll be there in 30 minutes. After she hung up, Jason started the car. "I'll drive you." "Jason, you don't have to— Yes, I do. This is my job, remember? Head of security, head of making sure you get where you need to go safely." Eleanor smiled, some of her natural confidence returning. "Then drive, Mr. Brooks, and maybe exceed a few speed limits. I have an empire to run." The closing meeting took 4 hours, Eleanor negotiating terms and signing documents while Jason waited outside the conference room with Marcus, who'd come along as additional security. The deal they were finalizing was the Henderson acquisition, the same one that had triggered Thomas Wright's descent into criminal behavior. By the end of the meeting, Morgan Holdings had officially added a portfolio of healthcare investments worth over $200 million to their assets. Eleanor emerged looking exhausted but triumphant. "It's done. We're officially the largest healthcare investment firm on the East Coast." "Congratulations," Jason said. "Now can we please get you home so you can rest?" "I should go back to the office. There's still work." "Eleanor." Jason stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You've been operating on fumes for days. You closed a massive deal while processing trauma from a death threat. You're allowed to go home and rest." She studied his face, then sighed. "Fine, but only because you're very persuasive when you use that voice." "What voice?" "The one that makes me want to do whatever you say." Marcus coughed to cover a laugh, and Jason shot him a look. His second-in-command was definitely going to give him grief about this later. They drove to Jason's apartment instead of Eleanor's, stopping to pick up Liam from school on the way. Michelle had texted that morning saying she'd handle the pickup if needed, but Jason wanted to be there for his son after the chaos of the day. Liam came running when he saw the car, backpack bouncing, his face lighting up when he realized Eleanor was in the passenger seat. "Are you staying for dinner again?" he asked hopefully. "If your dad will have me," Eleanor said. "He definitely will. He makes this face when you're around." "What face?" Jason asked, pulling away from the school. "Like you're happy but also nervous. It's weird, but good weird." Eleanor laughed, genuine and unguarded, and Jason felt something settle in his chest. This was right. The three of them together, building something that looked suspiciously like a family. It was complicated and unconventional, and probably moving too fast, but it felt right in a way nothing had since Sarah died. That evening, they ordered Chinese food and ate in the blanket fort that Liam had reinforced with Eleanor's suggested umbrella defenses. They played board games, Liam winning at Monopoly through a combination of luck and ruthless 9-year-old business tactics that made Eleanor laugh until she cried. They watched a movie, some animated thing about talking animals that Jason lost the plot of because he was too focused on Eleanor's head on his shoulder and Liam's feet in his lap. After Liam went to bed, Eleanor helped Jason clean up the disaster of their evening. They worked in comfortable silence, moving around his small kitchen like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. "Thank you," Eleanor said as Jason handed her a dish to dry. "For today, for tonight, for everything. I know this is complicated, having me constantly at your place, disrupting your routine." "You're not disrupting anything. You're improving it." "Liam's really okay with this? With us?" Jason thought about his son's easy acceptance, his obvious affection for Eleanor, the way he'd started referring to her as Eleanor instead of Ms. Morgan, like she was already part of their lives. "He told me last week that I was allowed to be happy, that his mom would want that. He's 9 years old and already more emotionally mature than most adults I know. He gets that from you. He gets it from Sarah. She was the emotional center of our family. I'm just trying to live up to her example." Eleanor set down the dish towel and turned to face Jason. "Can I ask you something? And I need you to be completely honest. Always. Am I a replacement for Sarah in your mind? Someone to fill the gap she left?" Jason took Eleanor's face in his hands, making sure she could see the truth in his eyes. "No, you're not a replacement for anyone. Sarah was my first love, my wife, Liam's mother. She'll always be part of me. But you're not her, and I don't want you to be. You're Eleanor. Brilliant, driven, occasionally terrifying Eleanor who built an empire from nothing and still finds time to reinforce blanket forts with my son. I love you because of who you are, not because of who you're replacing." Tears slipped down Eleanor's cheeks. "I needed to hear that. I've been afraid that I'm just convenient, just the woman who happened to be there when you were ready to move on." "You're not convenient. You're necessary. There's a difference." They kissed then, soft and sweet, a reaffirmation of everything they'd said and felt. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor was smiling. "So what happens now?" she asked. "We've caught the people threatening me. I've closed my big deal. We've confessed our feelings in your kitchen. What's next?" "Next, we figure out how to make this work long-term, how to balance your career and my job and Liam's needs, and the fact that we're technically boss and employee." "That last part might need to change," Eleanor said carefully. "Not because I want you to leave Morgan Holdings, but because if we're serious about this relationship, the power dynamic becomes problematic." Jason had been thinking the same thing. "I could report to someone else. Move my position so you're not my direct supervisor." "I was thinking bigger than that. I want to create a chief security officer position, someone at the executive level who reports directly to the board instead of to me. It's a promotion with a significant raise, and it solves the power dynamic problem." Jason stared at her. "Eleanor, that's a huge change. People will ask questions. Let them ask. I'll tell them the truth, that our security needs have grown beyond what a traditional head of security can manage, and we need someone at the executive level to oversee it properly." Which is completely true. The fact that it also solves our personal situation is just fortunate timing. "You've really thought this through." "I've thought about nothing else for the last week." "Jason, I want this to work. Not just work, but really work. I want to build a life with you and Liam. I want to be the person you come home to, the person Liam knows he can count on. But I can't do that if there's always this question of whether I'm showing you favoritism or whether you're getting opportunities because we're together." Jason pulled her close, amazed at how she'd managed to think through the practical problems even while dealing with death threats and major business deals. "When do you want to announce the position change?" "Next week, after the right arrests are public and the connection to Morgan Holdings is clear. It will make sense from a security standpoint, and the timing will seem reactive to the threat rather than personal." "You're kind of brilliant, you know that? I didn't build an $8 billion company by being impulsive." Eleanor smiled.